Good evening, and welcome to Mental Health, Wellness, and Recovery. My name is Richard Weingarten, and I'll be your host for tonight's show. A lot of attention has been given to the homeless in our society since the COVID-19 pandemic. There's also been much focus on crime and traffic fatalities, but our society has another alarming problem: food insecurity or hunger. On tonight's show, we will look at food insecurity or hunger that many people in Connecticut face on a regular basis. Connecticut Food Share, a statewide nonprofit organization that provides food to food pantries around the state, estimates that nearly 400,000 people confront food insecurity on a continual basis. An estimated 12%, or 1 in 8 children living in Connecticut, go hungry regularly. And another important statistic relevant to our show tonight is that 40% of all food manufactured and sold is wasted. That is, it's thrown out or destroyed without being consumed by humans. We'll look at food waste and food rescue in our show tonight, and with me to discuss food rescue and its distribution to food pantries and other outlets around Connecticut is Fred Goodman, Manager of Retail Donations and Partnerships for Connecticut Food Share. Also with me tonight is Stacy Smith, the Site Director for Food Rescue in Northwest Connecticut. With 350 community volunteers, Stacy serves New Hartford, Bethlehem, Bantam, Litchfield, Torrington, and rural areas also such as Lakeville, Winstead, New Milford, and others. Often seen as an urban crisis, food scarcity affects rural people also. Stacy will explain why food rescue is necessary in the farming regions of the state. To give you an idea of the magnitude of Fred's work, with 4 permanent staff members and scores of volunteers, they receive food from 192 partners that involve Stop and Shop, Costco, Big Y, Trader Joe's, Walmart, and dozens of other providers and manufacturers. Scores of volunteers help Fred's staff deliver the donated food to 340 retail providers or food pantries around the state. In fiscal year 2023, Fred's retail operation offered 12 million pounds of food that resulted in 10 million meals for hungry Connecticut residents. Stacy, welcome. Currently, Food Rescue works closely with Connecticut Food Share, transporting and delivering food. What's your relations like with Connecticut Food Share, and could you tell us a little bit about how you recruit and coordinate some of your volunteers?
Sure, thank you. It's good to be here. Our partnership with Connecticut Food Share basically provides a specific training to directly transfer donations from supermarkets like Stop and Shop, where pantries are located within a very close vicinity to that store. So it is within the best interest of the food, especially when it comes to perishable, to have a volunteer from that town pick up the food from the local Stop and Shop and bring it directly to that pantry. It saves a lot of money in gas. It engages community, and it's been a really successful partnership so far.
Thank you. Well, Fred, welcome to the show.
Thank
you. Would you tell our viewers a little bit about your retail food rescue operation? Who works in the statewide emergency operation with you, and where do you deliver the food on a regular basis? Let's start with the first part. Could you talk a little bit about the retail rescue operation that you had?
Yes, I will. Well, I'm happy to be here as well. We do rescue food all across the state of Connecticut, and I work with a team of 4 incredible people who coordinate with retail donors in every county in the state. And so their role is to build a great relationship with the retail donor, and by doing so, they're in the store quite frequently and communicating with each department manager to acquire as much donated food as we can. And then we have either someone from one of our local pantries that will go there to rescue the food, or we will use a volunteer that will go in and rescue the food and then take it to one of the local food pantries. And like Stacy's saying, it's like we try to stay within like 25 minute radius of where the food is being picked up to where it's being delivered.
What kind of food does the Stop and Shop give you for the rescue operation?
Well, we get meat. They provide us with frozen meat, a variety of fresh produce. We've been able to secure a lot of food from their deli department, some prepared foods, and then what we call salvage is more shelf-stable items. So we get a variety of all those different sorts that we can provide to our community partner.
Does your organization have, say, warehouses or refrigerated places where you can hold the food?
Yes, we have 3 warehouses in the state. Our main one is in Wallingford, and we have a warehouse in Bloomfield and then down in Bridgeport. And all of our facilities have refrigeration, they have freezers, and we have ample amount of shelving for any food that we do rescue.
How much food security is in Connecticut? Who are the people that are food insecure? Let's start with Stacy on that one.
Shockingly, there are a lot of young adults, I would say 18 to 34 years of age, which are about a quarter of the population of young adults right now are food insecure. That includes college students who are, working part-time. But with the rising cost of inflation, it's also seniors, working families with 2 incomes, especially families with children.
I imagine that it's pretty difficult for, say, a single mom with children to be food secure.
Absolutely. The pandemic did offer extended benefits, but those have since come to a close, and so especially a single parent working full-time with kids in school, the rising cost of food and transportation, that's definitely been a challenge.
Fred, could you talk a bit about the expression food desert that's used for people living in the urban areas? What's a food desert?
Yes.
Why is it happening? And what do people in those urban areas, what can they do to access some of the rescue food?
Well, the food deserts are in the more rural areas, but they're in the inner cities as well. And those deserts are there where there isn't access to healthy food. A family may have to drive 10, 15 miles to get to a supermarket, and that's a challenge. It's a challenge.
If you don't have a car, it's a
If
huge
you don't have a
challenge.
challenge, it's a huge challenge. In the inner city, take Bridgeport, for instance. On the east side of Bridgeport, it's a major food desert. They have a lot of bodegas around, which meets the local needs somewhat, but when you're looking for food at good cost and healthy food, you have to go outside of that community in order to get that food. So, yeah.
What about people with disabilities? Do they make up a part of your population that's needing food?
Absolutely. I recently was at an event with Johanna Hayes, and there were a bunch of people communicating.
Johanna Hayes is a former politician or representative.
She's a congresswoman, right? And
Congresswoman.
She was also food insecure, and she was a working mom with children going back to school and needed to, admittedly publicly needed to visit food pantries. So she's really a champion of this issue. And some of the representatives from pantries were indicating that there are students with disabilities who have school year-round, and since schools are closed during the summer, they're having challenges getting meals as well. Transportation is always an issue, but I know that there has been a shortage of drivers in Connecticut. I've heard across the board, pantries, agencies saying that there is a large need for drivers, and that limits the availability of transportation to pantries.
You mentioned the schools, and in the front page of the New Haven Register today was an article about Governor Lamont announcing $7 million for school meals. And he's trying to get cost-free meals for the state's entire 513,000 student population. He says it's a goal within reach in 2024. As far as this upcoming school year, the Register article said that 114 school districts with more than 177,000 students who had previously paid a reduced price for breakfast will now get them free in the school year coming up. And he said that in addition, 128 districts with 13,000 students eligible for reduced cost lunches will now get them at no cost through the distribution of additional American Rescue Plan funding. So that's really good news, I think, for students that are food insecure.
Yeah.
And hopefully in another year, everyone will get food for breakfast and lunch at the schools. It makes a huge difference. I've taught schools, and to have students hungry, they're distracted, they can't pay attention, they get angry. It's a real problem. And so to help them be able to come to school well fed is a huge step forward.
Absolutely.
Right. Richard,
yes.
if I may, can I just go back to the food desert question?
Go ahead.
One of the things that we're doing at Connecticut Food Share is we're bringing food into those communities. So we have 114 mobile pantries across the state going to those food desert communities. And the great thing is we're bringing in fresh produce and really, really healthy food. And it usually comes in at least 2 times a month. So that's a great opportunity. That's one way that we're really trying to, combat and fight that food insecurity in those food desert areas.
Great, that sounds really wonderful.
Yeah.
Stacy, you mentioned earlier in a previous conversation we had on the phone, you said that seniors are one of your most effective food rescuers. Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Sure. We oftentimes, food pantries operate during morning, afternoon business hours. And so that's limiting for people who work, because a lot of our rescues happen during the day. So the senior population and retirees have really been a large part of our rescue operation.
They have the time available, don't they?
They have the time available. They have lived experience and a genuine wish to give back to their community. And they have some of the most generous, kind relationships with agencies. I get calls all the time. Not only are they, picking up donations and dropping off, but they're establishing relationships with the local pantries and then volunteering additional time at those pantries outside of food donations. So the wonderful thing about food recovery is that it fosters relationships within community and builds out further relationships, which definitely benefit pantries.
Fred, you mentioned in a conversation we had earlier that you tried to embody trust and partnership with the people that you partner with to deliver the food. Could you talk about that a bit? Because it sounds to me like what you're doing too, Stacy, is creating a community of people that are involved in food rescue.
Yes.
Could you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, well, there are many different organizations doing food rescue. We're doing it for our agency partners. Stacy's doing it for another set of the community and the people that she's working with. And so I just think when we can all partner together, when we can all communicate, it's like the end goal is the same. Right. We're all working towards that end goal to make sure that a family or an individual who is in need of food can get it. And so whatever we can do as a community just to come together to meet that end, I think is success. Yeah.
I think, Stacy, you mentioned that that you what you do is not a charity. It's really neighbor helping neighbor, right? Absolutely. And you communicate that with the people that work with you, don't you?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
I imagine that makes people feel pretty good that they're helping out a neighbor,
Absolutely. And oftentimes it could very well be their neighbor, right? And there are I'm always impressed with the way that our volunteers handle themselves, with the amount of integrity and respect they have for pantries, and the way that they interact with pantries. Oftentimes, one of the most rewarding parts about food recovery, especially for volunteers, is to see firsthand where their rescue, maybe 20 minutes of their day, has a direct impact. I can't tell you how many times there have been people that have thanked me personally for what I do, and I always feel like you don't need to thank me because it's something that I just wish to do, and that's what a lot of our volunteers, it's really important to them. So,
And you mentioned also to me that that sometimes the people that receive food become volunteers also.
absolutely, right.
Yeah.
We've
that
found
happen
that.
quite a bit? I imagine it happens
Yes.
quite a bit, actually.
It does, right. And it secures volunteers, I think, for life, and it passes it through families, the shared experience of food recovery, but also being food insecure. A lot of our volunteers and site directors have experienced it in one way, shape, or form throughout their life. And so it definitely, you need to have a heart for this work.
I'd agree.
Fred, what about people of color and immigrants? Are they also food insecure?
Well, yes. A lot of people of color, they do live in impoverished neighborhoods. Income is low, and immigrants come here. They don't have the benefits of an American. So food is one of the main sources that they need. And so, it's not easy going to a pantry and saying that you need food. So I like what you said about serving people with dignity and respect, because that helps to knock down the barriers so that they can go there and receive the food without any hardship or any
Sense of, say, shame.
yes,
or
shame or
something like
hurt or anything. Yes, if they need food, they can get it. Absolutely.
Let me ask you something else. How often do you meet with your volunteers? I mean, the volunteers seem to be huge, a huge number of volunteers. Do you meet with them once and kind of give them an orientation? Do you have classes for them? Do you meet with them, say, on a sort of irregular basis? How do you coordinate the volunteers that you work with? That's my question.
We initially send out a greeting, a welcome email, because volunteers can very easily sign up. I get a lot of people who sign up because they heard about it through social media. So it depends on where those volunteers are coming from. We try to table at local events and farmers markets, do presentations at waste recovery, government meetings. So we do get a wide variety of volunteers. I try to host a volunteer appreciation event. We hosted one in April at a local farm, a regenerative organic farm. And mostly it's about building community and partnerships and face-to-face. I think that's something that we definitely have room to improve. But
Talk a bit about that couple that had the pallet of
Oh, yes.
cucumbers. That sounded like a great story.
right, it was at an event that we were invited to talk about food recovery in Northwest Connecticut, and there was a couple there who run a nonprofit named Produce to the People. And they spoke about, during the pandemic, feeling inspired to grow and to give the produce, and not having any experience as farmers, just decided to do it out of generosity. And it grew, and the need for fresh produce, especially in food recovery, is immense. So they decided to start asking local residents who grew farms in their backyard if they wish to have a donation, to leave it by the side of the road, and they would pick it up. And it's grown tremendously. They serve a lot of our food pantries in Northwest Connecticut. And through that meeting we had in one evening, days later, we had an opportunity to rescue a huge load of cucumbers, and I was able to reach out directly to them, and they were more than happy to go pick up a pallet of cucumbers. So
That's very nice.
Yes.
Yeah, it sounds like they really got into it.
they did. Oh yeah, definitely. Huge help.
And Fred, what about the SNAP program being cut? You familiar with that, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely.
And that's created a kind of a food crisis for a lot of families, hasn't it?
It definitely has. Yep. So the benefits are cut, and it's just a spiraling effect. So the need at the local level, the community level, to have food available for those families it's very important. It's very important, and I think the food rescue piece that we do plays into that as well. Not all of our agency partners receives food rescue from us, but the ones that are open at least once a week, they get food rescue from us, and so that additional food for that family is key. It is key.
You both talked about or retail agencies, or the places that hold the food and give it out to people. Who are these food agencies, these retail agencies? Can you talk a bit about that? Stacy, who are these agencies and how do they get involved?
Are you talking about food pantries?
Food pantries, that's what I'm talking about,
okay.
yeah.
Most of them are nonprofit organizations, or like you said earlier, faith-based organizations who initially saw a need in their community. Most of the time it starts off as a small neighborly, offering, and it turns into a recognition of a large need in the community, and so they are able to partner with Food Rescue and Connecticut Food Share to have more access. And it's usually their volunteers who are helping to hand out. So we have food pantries, shelters, soup kitchens. We do have a really small church in, I believe it's New Hartford, that has a vestibule that is open 24 hours a day. So the rest of the church is locked, and they are able to have shelf-stable food. They don't have a huge need yet, but it started in the pandemic with recognizing members of their congregation who needed food, and so now anyone at any time, 24 hours a day, can just go into the door, take what they need, and leave. And that has been a really successful program.
Fred, you mentioned that. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
I was going to say a lot of them are also like churches and community centers or community kitchens and things like that. And it's like I think most of them, they just have a heart to meet the need of the people in their community. And, we are a good partner with them because we can provide them the resources to be able to have that food available for the community. So, we depend on them a lot.
You mentioned Hartford Healthcare has gotten involved. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yes. We, the past year and a half, we've partnered with Hartford Healthcare. And, sometimes in their cafeteria, if they have any excess food that's left over, what they will do is they will freeze it for us. And then one of our community kitchens will go and retrieve that food. So now the community kitchen can use that in their meal program. So, that's a great success for us. That's a good help.
Great. What about restaurants? Do they contribute at all?
Well, I don't know if we don't so much with restaurants because a lot of our food is it's more shelf stabled or produce that's given out rather quickly. We don't take so much prepared foods. Just because it's a little bit more of a food safety challenge for us to be able to secure it. I mean, there's a lot of different principles and policies and actions on how to keep it safe until you go to use it again. So any prepared food, it's not something that we really want to, engage in.
And our model is able to really embrace that because our volunteers are in the community, frequent the restaurants, and so we have successfully partnered with restaurants. We have a South Florida site that just partnered with the Grand Prix, and they rescued, I think it was 90,000 pounds of prepared food from that, and successfully, distributed it to their pantries. So
tell me, why is food scarcity a problem in the rural areas? You'd think that people would be farmers or they'd be gardeners or something that they wouldn't have food insecurity?
I think a lot of it is access, also the demographics, and also supermarkets. I've had towns in Northwest Connecticut that have lost their supermarket, and so and there's not a lot of transportation or bus services. DoorDash and Uber are not operating successfully because it's so rural.
I see.
That's definitely a challenge. But it's nice that we have rescuers in those areas that are willing to travel to areas like Torrington and things like that that will help.
You spoke about environmental advocacy. Could you talk a bit about that, please?
Yes, our mission is twofold: is to help end food insecurity, but also to positively affect climate change. Food waste accounts for a large amount of the carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases in landfills. The statistic is if food waste were a country, it would come in third after the United States and China.
Wow.
So, and the other staggering statistic is that 20% of fresh water goes to grow the food that's wasted in our country,
Wow.
which is
As a takeaway,
staggering.
Fred, what would you talk about and how do people in the viewing public can get involved in the work that you're doing?
Oh, well, there's a lot of different, they can go to ctfoodshare.org, and there's a lot of resources on there other than food on how people can get help and also to help.
Great.
I very quickly I just wanted to add to what Stacy was saying about the food waste in the landfills. All of the retail donors, that's one of their main reasons for donating, is to keep the food out of the landfills because it's still very good food, and just make it available to the local community.
Thank you, Fred. We
Yeah.
have 1 minute to go. What would you add to that, Stacy?
I would say that if anyone wishes to volunteer, especially with food rescue in Northwest Connecticut, we do have 3 sites in Connecticut: Hartford County, Fairfield County, and Northwest Connecticut. All they need to do is simply go to foodrescue.us and click on sign up.
Wonderful, wonderful. I want to thank you both for being on the show tonight.
You're
I've really
welcome.
enjoyed our conversation. I hope the viewers have
Welcome.
also. And I want to thank the viewers also for tuning in tonight. And I hope you have gotten sort of the urge to get involved in food rescue too.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much and have a good evening. Good night.
Thank you.